Stand up for Jesus, ye soldiers of the cross. Lift high his royal banner, it must not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead, till every foe is vanquished, and Christ is Lord indeed.
Ere asidani ayiye ne ede ma Nyankopon wene nkwa na dum ne humobra ode adom yen. Glory, honor and adoration be to the Most High God, whose grace has bestowed upon us and we are alive today. I'm your brother Emmanuel Jesse Kwansa, and I'm with you once again on Rescue the Perishing platform on the segment Questions and Answers. Midofupa, see here, ya what they say, ewo yijumedi iswa. Na eye nije ya huwa na eboa ema de chenya de sayemuno. Itumi dwendwen Onyankopon asem ho. Na eboa ye ma yiditu anamo a ese na efata. Ebrimo menewo ebehwe adesua, the issue about head covering. Ane head covering akoye nkomobo bi a medofopa abeye dwumedie anase asebisa bi a enuanum bi ebisebisa na obisa with the purpose say so ema ewo se wo hata wo tri so ewo ihia dan mu yekohia ye sori Onyankopon mekai brebi mikosra woman bi na me call ne nche ye di nkomo meka se ye mmompa ye ape no twe duku empo no onya duku nti okofa hanki na ode hata ne tri so na ye bo empire. And I've heard so many people akosra some churches like the Pentecostal churches ni bi na worker say e brebi abesin ko no o ko in their meeting place na wo moduku a etuma wugina gate na no ni omo de duku ni bia ma na wabo before you enter. Nti ade na ba be it say some kind of doctrinal issue bi a ede ewo ho na no na enuanum ni bi bisa questions. There are some brethren in a congregation and be womo Agape Top Church of Christ I bisa these questions say adentina ma mo duku ni ade. One sister be a converted from Pentecost. We an issue pa anti she kept asking this question and enya da jesu ho ade wa sorry, but I think say it will be of a great interest for one so say many won so becha adesua na other YouTube, other Facebook for posterity na going forward, you know, obi biara ope ntiasie bi no wetumi ayede enya. So if you also have issue with regards to head covering or problem with sell a ma hata won tree so ananse se wo hata won tree so I think this video I will recommend it for you. Now what's what to me I recommend it e dey ama afoforo ni nyina ya ba beti Onyankopon asem no asie yi. I'm brother Emmanuel Jesse Kwansa. Keep sharing this video. Tell a brother to tell another brother. Tell a friend to tell another friend that we are live on Rescue the Perishing and we are discussing the topic head covering. Unya daje na ofa Bible sa topic we ni a topic bi a enye too common for some now for a lot of Bible passages to discuss it, but most especially about one place be near ta kind sa head covering what this year, and it is found in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 11. You be bia o problem with head covering bia no issue ni nyina gina 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Na we obi a ope Bible adesua we oba we bema o obi biara ope no kra bi ehunu no 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and the book of 1 Corinthians, you know, 16 chapters. Now, in all the 16 chapters, ni mono adofopa. Ya wadifia kese bi o wa se wudi kan hu ansa na wo tackle the issue of 1 Corinthians what you mean yamunti ase. I keep telling people say, oh kan 1 Corinthians from chapter 1 to chapter 16. Now wo di aye nchire biara, first of all have this in mind. And unti me chira de wo Bible college, ma chira de wo miamia udo bibre. I keep telling students of the Bible say this is what you have to do. We didn't say yeah, a boama winya the understanding no better and clearer. And until 1 Corinthians chapter 1, see chapter 16, no, a problem na so current and na Paul solve. Until I call that book a problem solving book. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 to chapter 16. It dealing with many problems and na so current as afunimu. No so for Paul who ni say e was say or ye ho adesua e so kasa ho de kire current asafo mano for them to get an understanding from. Into obi baby say therefore ye nso betumi dia ye nkire ana depending on the issue. And e be kire say ade a wo say ye nso ye de ye nkire nne ana ense say ye de ye nkire nne because inyama ni bi o wa a particular problem and e cause current. And na Paul address it. Therefore, extend and fan call other places to establish Bible authority. Take this from me. Who person will establish Bible authority be our subject be one. Ebia, over the book of 1 Corinthians, Corinth account wasem. Who call the book of Ephesians, Ephesus as a phenomenon, ye can be wasem. Who call Galatia, and now who call Colossae. Yaka won miabe ba ku mienu miensa bi enne no tu za de ne ye general problem eno no sa ne de yetumi gina so de establish Bible authority unlike the head covering issue eno no de enye common no it is only seen in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 na ye beba so ne aba be discuss problems are na cause wo Corinth asafo ni mu a Osoma for Paul dealing with now or discuss ye na ehu ya say ye nso ye be discuss no ebini. Okay, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. The first 4 chapters are what the book of 1 Corinthians ni mo a. Problem na cause wo ho nyina ye division empapemu. Obi sorry a meme ye Paul de, obi sorry a meme ye Apollos de. Obi sorry a meme ye Kefa ana Peter de ebi so see ye de Christo ni edinichi. So there were 4 divisions in the church. And Paul address a problem no catch one say, why are we divided? Odi kan say klo fiefo aba beyi no asutire say apere wo Corinth asafo ni mu. No bi sorry a me ye wechi dini no. 2 major questions that Paul bisa ye no dey solve this issue ni say so Paul ni ye bo mo sushe ni dimu ana Apollos ni ye bo mo sushe ni dimu ana Peter no it is Christ. Therefore we ought not to be followers of Paul and say ye Peter echidifo and say ye Apollos echidifo na mom I was say ye Christo echidifo say ono na ye bo ye sushe ni dimu. Eye Paul no be wuji ye nkwa na debi. Eye Peter ne be wuji ye nkwa na debi. Eye Apollos ne be wuji ye nkwa na enu si ye debi. Eye Christo. Therefore, we ought to be followers of Christ and not men. And or this solve that issue no ewie ye. In chapter 5, problem na cause Corinth asafo ni mu ne say. Brother bi akofa ne papa yere. Emma oti asafo ni mu and o pese wunya the clue ni ya na say the members no esoso no so ebi kra be hwe ne so na esa akwa no ne bosse so otumi akofa ne papa yewe. But Paul condemned that act and told them say no, the brother ought to be disfellowshipped. O see ye ni free asafo ni mu we say obi ntumi metena Kristo asafo ni mu mbebo sa abrabo bone no. And Paul dissolve that issue and ampa ye did disfellowship brother no. Na obasa wunya ne into aso a 2 Corinthians ne dealing with the brother coming back empoma edu baby church ne se ye nje no. And Paul san true 2 Corinthians say e was moje no. Until the issue of brother bi akofa ne papa yere no was also solved there. Near solve that issue no. Bet me a general problem and other passages back condemning that act no fornication, adultery, a sin. Therefore, a bit to me the preacher ne akache nkofo say won't to be nkofo papa yere. Though no a problem and no cause of current, but can be generalized because of some passages are a throw light on this issue ninti. Chapter 6. Onyanya asem a na de akokot. Brother we nya asem na akọ report ni ababa beche no na de na kopie court Paul say nti mu ni nyansani bia wo mumu a obetumi esiesi onua ntemu ana. That issue was also resolved. In chapter 7, the issue of marriage. Awarie ena no so Paul kasa kire won we otigeni na ho kire wa ware se de be ya nkobo adwaman. Aware for nso o ware ye nyai enye sa asan wechi na kofa de aware de we ja no and or discuss the issue of marriage ewo. Chapter 8 ni chapter 10, the same problem na all deal with, and the problem ni ye say enuane a ye de ama abosom food offered to idols ye to me di ananse se ye di mi ye di a eye ananse se ye di ena no so Paul ka che se aduane na obedi na betu na sinti bia jai na momo nyankopon de osese ye de asedaje ni ye bo so mpa ye a wate bibia ho na mom se betu na sinti bia nti no na we jai. That issue was resolved. Chapter 9, ena no so ye se Paul kra onya apostle. Paul said there be me apostle of Jesus Christ. No chere kwan of far so de be ye Christ echidini. How he became an apostle of Christ. Paul explained and dealt with that issue. And the church mu. And afei so obebedu eye chapter 11. Na chapter 11 maka 8 and 10. In chapter 11 two major issues na ewo. Head covering and ye bedi hu nkomo no. Ena afei the Lord's Supper. Until that issue no was discussed. Na meja mpena mabe no so later. Chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14, it deal with spiritual gift. So be to me kankasa wudo, be to me share nkomo, be to me di jumedi awudo bebre no. What is the significance? How should it be done? Until chapter 12 discuss ade no. Chapter 13 no be chere say hey ade na ntena wa afebo. Entena wa afebo. Until chapter 13 verse 8 odo to ntwa da nkom hye de ebegu kasa hudo ebeja nim de ebesa se de wie peye ni nya ba ye ye fa ne fa no obegu no na Paul discuss that issue no so de ede e to ho maye. In chapter 15, the issue of resurrection, Paul survey. In chapter 16, collection for the saint, okoma ba yenye den, the issue was also discussed. In chapter 1 to chapter 16 of 1 Corinthians, a problem solving. And Paul solving problems, na amma ye bebenya munti asye eye. Now, with regards to head covering and ye bebedi ho ankomono. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and also for Paul fiase na ne asifia ofiye no osase na ahana me no wo share adesua no ase enuntima yeni enkomo. Verse 1 of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, we are discussing the issue of head covering. Imitate me just as I also imitate Christ. Munhwa minsua me said dia menso mi hwe Kristo na misua no eno no o say wo hwe me na wasua me a eti say wusua Kristo udi mechi eti say wudi Kristo echi esa say Kristo akwan na me di adwuma enye ono Paul no anakwan. Now there are so many references to these things. I bet boy ma be wunu say ampara we ought to be followers of Christ. Say there are no Paul no you follower of Christ no. Eno na what say ye so yetumi ye den ye. Now in verse 2, now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. In the house man for Paul say nuanom mon kai me. Na kai amode kai me no. Mo kai me say me di asedie bi, me di atemudie bi, me di nhyehyeye bi maamo. Offre no the traditions. Ma this yan wudo bebre mu no ma ba hu ne say there are two traditions discussed in the whole of the Bible. There were positive traditions and there were negative traditions. Into positive traditions ni bi ene ye ka ho asem no. Ene say the asomafo no de ma the early Christians no abeye atetesem de amaye. We ought also to follow it. I will say yenso ye de adwuma. I will say yenso yesua ne ye de boy ye bra. That is a positive tradition. And only a traditional, a very positive. Say I will say ye de adwuma. No, enya no nko a adofo. There are several passages in the Bible Paul raises our concern. Even in the book of 2 Thessalonians, chapter 2, beloved, the verse 15. For Paul say, therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or by our epistles. Inti enuanom munso atete sam no a yede ma mo no na mungina mu atete sam a ye kire mo no munso muden sadia yen yede ma mo ewo ya sam kan so ana se ya twere na ye twere de bra mu no. So this is a positive tradition. This is a positive tradition. If you don't go to chapter 3 verse 6 Paul san boso of 2 Thessalonians no. But we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly and not according to the tradition which you receive from us. Said the nipa ne ye no eni dia ye de amamo no enkwa montwe mo mfiri no. This is also a positive tradition. Unlike churches a crack creed, churches a crack magazines bi na what this magazines ni mu nsem de ye adwuma asori bia misua na misuku komu mikopie mu na omo kire ye de a sheet of paper bi di fi on headquarters na wodeba eno na osofo no hwe mu preachi eno na wo church member na sa na wotwe no wo behwe mu dia ye wa adesua biara. Nti sometimes sa magazine no emu nsem no any Bible nkwa they are being supposed to believe that magazine than the Bible. I don't know by a negative tradition. Said Matthew chapter 15 verse 9 Yesu ka bi wasem say e janma tete sem a no e nipa na ahyehe. Eno ne a negative tradition. Eno no de ye de adwuma enye ye el Christosomu. The Christosomu ye ni creed. Christosomu ye ni nipa nhyehe ye biara. In Galatians chapter 1 obekaya Paul bonkofo no koko ewo the verse 6 na kosi 9 no etwe nwadwen gina so say eden na wo twe wo ho efri Kristo nhyehyeye no ho ekodi enipa bi atete sam bi echi na okeka sansam no a wudi bebedu the verse 11 and the verse 12 of Galatians chapter 1 or say, but I make known to you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached by me is not according to man. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through the revelation of Jesus Christ. So this is a positive traditional, and only the efiera di Yesu Kristo nchen. But no nipa bi da yeso a ono aso a na no ye ne nkyerɛkyerɛ. Nti Paul abosa asem we so wo verse 2 no, etwe adwi di ejina biribi so that the people are failing to keep some positive traditions, but are trying to hold on to some negative traditions. Kokobo e wa hano no. Inti ye bisua head covering no, yenhwe na sa teachings we yankoyama na mama be ye negative tradition. Yankoyama na mama ye nipa bi nkyerɛkyerɛ. Enya sa e de ohaw ena de bebre Kristo asafo no eni nisie said ya ewo se etumi eko kokobo enunti mamene wo yenye ahweyie. Now in the verse 3 Osman for Paul said verse 3, but I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Inti aha osomafo Paul ade bia ye friend divine ranking for headship. Oma sa divine ranking ni se he bema ni ti ani Kristo ti ni onyankopon oba ti ni bema. Inti za de we no a osomafo Paul aka ne sa no odofba wuni tumi biara se obetumi ayede asesa sa ade no. The head of every man is Christ. Inti bebe bi efa ni tumi a ofa fi Kristo nchen. Kristo ba asase so no ni tumi nyina ofa firi onyankopon oye eja no ne nchen. Saa na oba nso ni tumi a ofa no ofa fi bema nchen. So this is a divine ranking. There are several passages I church resade no and my baby who said the head of every man is Christ. Okay, Ephesians chapter 1, 22 to 23, also Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, chapter 5, verse 23. Even in the book of Philippians chapter 2, verse 10 to 11, say the head of Christ is God, and the head of every man is Christ. Na ampara we ye no de bebe to aso say oba so ni ti ani ni kunu. Yes, the head of every woman is man, right from Genesis chapter 3 verse 16. Ana onyankopon ka kire oba ne say wo ti ani wo kunu. In Ephesians chapter 5 verse 22 obekire say e mamre won wase nse wo kunu ase say de wo ye de ama Ewurade. Na eno no ye efutuo ni nkyerɛkyerɛ a wosi ye nyina yetumi ye de yenya. Inti aha obema divine ranking no. Therefore, woman it take authority from the man. The man takes authority from Christ. Christ takes authority from God the Father. Na ama de no the chain no ubreki no enyi ye. Inti oba ni fefri ni kunu nchen no o fefri Kristo ho, o fefri Kristo ho no o fefri onyankopon ho. That is the chain. Inti awoso oba obre ne ho ase na eno no so no ema onyankopon bota yetumi yeden ebem. Now in verse 4, every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonor the head. Inti aha ye ba be deal with the subject of veil. Why one must subject himself to the authority, to the head. Now emwama on dishonor the head, you know. So we are going to discuss the subject of the veil. Any adisua hudo bia e wasi yetumi eden yenya. Banya da Genesis verse 4 ni ye pa. Every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonors the head. So we will be a winning Jew for certain pa. Jew ni beri me biara bompa ya or tribri bi hatani so. Jew ni beri me biara a leady public worship biara or hatani so. That is their culture. Inti the Bible kan wahane say bema bompa ye na wahatani so a. Enshene numonyam. So is it going against the Jewish custom? No. No. Share the problem so ewo current. Osomafo Paul deal with any general. Unya ye ni general pe it should go against even our Lord Jesus Christ. So why Jesus movie ni bia or Garden of Gethsemane ko bompa ya or hatani so. When in Jew culture biara, that is what they do. But we na they do it with a purpose. They do it with a motive. Sene beya won so obetumi ayeden aye de wo se woye. Even in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 15 verse 30, Bible say, and David went up by the ascent to Mount Olivet and wept as he went up and had his head covered, and he went barefoot And all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up weeping as they went up. Into a Jewish culture. But Paul catch a Corinthians and say, you ought not to do it. You ought not to do it. In the same book of 2 Samuel chapter 19 verse 4, Bible said, but the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son. That was their culture. That was their custom. But Bible say, Obema bompaya na o she nkom na wahata ni tiri so a, enhye ni tiri no animonyam. Adentia. I was say a consider contest a ye de kan asemu yi. Ni ti enhye na animonyam ne kire se wo ne headship ni mu no be mate ni Kristo. Anfa ni di anya de anfa ma ni ti no. Now, me be pese ye be ya ade bi. Ni ye koye ni mu no. I would like you to follow this study. Na membe kire ade we mu yie pa emfa nkire o. Sa de na Jew for ni ye no. Ni ye friend no the talit. Na eye we a na omo ede kire enidia na won wode ma wo Nyankopon. But in this context, you see, no, we as a mama, you are dishonoring your head. In Acts chapter 18, Ebra Paul, Echo, Jew for share the from the verse 4, basically verse 17. He went there as a Jew. Now, Bible say, as his custom was. So probably, Paul yes, I didn't. You ought to do that. So why is Paul telling us say and say ye waha? Bibi oho. Keep that in mind. Now my Bible edi ejinaso. Now I want to answer the verse 5. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. For that is one and the same as if she were shaved. Or say nese oba momo bompa ye no kata ni tiri so. Ana oba se nkom no kata ni tiri so a. Or say enu momu no onfa nidie man ni kunu no. Esan say oye sa etise obi a waboti kwa. Listen to this very well. So this is just the direct opposite of the verse 4. Verse 5 and the verse 6, you know, the direct opposite of it. Bema de ensaso cover, but oba de e was so cover na wan cover e niwo na te say wabotikwa. So in the verses, for if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it is sinful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. Ano this ho. Na me jini sa hani baby a controversy no. Ani baby a asofo ni bi. Ani baby a nkofo bi gina de church re say e wo so oba ohia ne ye bo mpaye ana so so be dwumedi ekoso a e wo so hata ni treso. If that is the case, and nature say there is a problem. Nature says manya mafom. Nature says manya maye boni tia onyankopon. Nature says manya asotwe bi ye den e ho de mame. If sana Bible nchirechire we etie dia. Badwenwu na dwen hu bio. The man is not supposed to cover his head. But ne binumu ye. So to their time, were they not supposed to do it no more ye ya na? Bible see there be was an accepted thing. Na Jew for no ye. But our current there oba nyesa ebema nyesa. And afi our current there oba was so kata ni triso. And na me baby say why? Adentina sa de no na etisa. Into the first section here say this is a physical thing. An additional covering na me de be kata mitiri so. Ene kra hu asofo ni bia wo ye yes ade no onam no ogu veil. osofo odi bibia hata ntiri so enzo say the Bible passage wey dey just say bema dey menye saa nanso waye. So what is the right interpretation ewa ha em gidi say yeto ye boase ne ye hwe a ebetumi aboaye. So we for the Greek expositor no a it's a point these things clearly say if a woman prefers a bare head she should remove her hair, but if womanly feeling forbids that then she should forbid the former. The Greek no person or tree indigenous so may a bebeti as any say. So bano and pebi be and fan katani triswa. Niwo ferry na ti said there were botikwa. Na so botikwa na se ne nibewu was adia na ho dia. Enye manen kata ni triso ewa ha. The person me do kwe nim. Ni yenya the clear understanding no ni ade betchre the verse 5, the 6, and if possible, the 7 no emu. Na etumi eboaye. Is Paul really dealing with an act of worship during Christianity? Se chinchina nche wo se oba hata ni triso. Se chinchina nche wo se bema kata ni triso. Na wanye sa de na waye boni ana. Is that what is going on here? So obuase na ma mene wo yenko yenim na yenkonkonko hwe dia ewo. The verse 7. For a man indeed ought to have not to cover his head, since he is the image and the glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For man, verse 8, is not from woman, but woman from man. Nor was man created for the woman, but woman for the man. For this reason, the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Ana besi yejina ni ebia ade animu. Ni yejina ha ni ebia ade animu no. Sa veil way is talking about a subject of subjection and obrasebi. Na uko Korintha, their custom, their culture, and say oba was symbol of authority. Say you are under a man. I mean marriage mono. And they say I need to cover my hair to identify me. Say mawari. In our culture today, yeah, crowd yeah, I for culture and you say yeah, better ring. I dear dance say my them are warrant. Unam no one say obi share ring, especially on this finger. Let's say worry. Okay, but their culture was obabi a worry bia no was so good veil, was so a kata ni triso. Esan say oye bema no nenimunyam. Ba obema de untimi nkata with triso because hunam femu no won worry emma Kristo. Ana woni Kristo nware ye honam femu. So that is something you ought not to do. But oba honam femu no wa ware any bema no, so you ought to do that. That was their custom. In fact, we ain't traveling to other countries because a ko Jew mu a Jew bema begu veil. You get it? Inti sadie we a custom issue osoma for Paul discuss and obekire say enye bema nti ne ye oba na emome ye oba nti bema nti ne ye oba ye oba ma bema obekire the reason why women were created was because said nyankopon per se obema nya oba won na sitine munti in relation to marriage. Nti asamo ye discuss wa ha no medofo a custom the mom enye a command edema all churches tienye pa na yeba enoso na yetumi ababa beti ase. So we the divine arrangement na ye kenkan word the verse 3 no a say na de no opasa ochre. There is a power, there is a sign, there is a symbol of authority, and that symbol of authority ni kire say oba we di ohye be ma bi ase na kire say oba ne guveil no into oba waware ena no ogu veil ɛwɔ saa brɛ ni mu ɔbaa on ware ye no ogu veil a ɛkyerɛ sɛ waware nti nsi so ogu veil no but or the reason bi be share ho say ni say nti na was oba hata ni tire so a sign above for nti because of the angels. There are two schools of thought. Now so two schools of thought no wonya daje a ye were angels ye fallen angels and why this your Bible mo 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 any Jude 6 kasafa fallen angels so and ye were ministering angels angels you know probably we don't even see them with our physical eyes, but they are present wherever the children of God are found. Okay, Matthew chapter 18 verse 10, 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 21, 1 Corinthians even chapter 4 verse 9. So say there are angels who moves around. Okay, because of those angels, the woman is to have a symbol of authority. But another school of thought that me na eye me strong conviction say nunti na Paul ekasa asem we ni say the word angels angeloi from the Greek word ase kire ye messengers asomafo people who have been sent yesoma obi a or messenger na unya daje na hwe current background yie pa as at the time asomafo Paul etro nwuma we di koma wo there was a pending problem na ekoso ewo ho problem na ekoso wo ni say na abosomsom kro before Christianity one day inti bosum ba kwa na wo kro mu ayesom no pa your friend Aphrodite no one kofo bi your friend one temple prostitute. This is a history, you can google it and you get them. Na sa temple prostitute one of the sign kire say ababa we or ye temple prostitute ni say obotikwa ye mani ni tiri nyina to show say or ye temple prostitute nti unye hu ababa no say we dey or ye temple prostitute and na say current na ye seaport nti no kofo ba ebedidwa na wokwa those who want to have fun wiase adwene mu no they go there to have fun with those prostitutes and then they go their way ura temple ni mu that is a sign that would be who Christosuma korua sa ekro we mu ama ya kan sam ni bi a kire sa temple prostitute mu and probably bi no ma ja sam ne dia ba be ye Christopher but wa be yo Christo ni three winning to be full overnight enu nti wa be yo Christo ni nanso ni three hit say a temple prostitute therefore sa nipa no onye den. I was so onya a symbol of authority chete we fit out to be animal be to me be ase into also is required to say on put it on a veil because of the angels by messengers be or wha na do follow suma to come and spy what is going on in Christianity. Now that jena me no nkenkan bi chapter 10 verse 32 and 33. Also chapter 10 no has to do with eduane ye dia ma abosom na Christopher ni di na tunkofo sintibia. So there were people or nanyam kwa mutimu ye Christopher na mu ye say these were angels now physically they come into their meeting place to report whatsoever na ekoso. In the chapter 10 we know by verse 32 and I verse 31. Therefore whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give no offense either to the Jews or to the Greeks or to the church of God. Verse 33. Just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but profit of many, that they may be saved. So give no offense to the Jews, nor to the Greeks, or to the church of God. There are messengers and angels are near soma won. No wabanu be hu kofo no kra mu na nkasakasa we kwaso no. We mu amuso mu no mu ye Christopher no mu die biade e dia ma abosom no. It's an offense. But to nitibia that is a stumbling block na chapter 8 chapter 10 e kan ho asem. Enunti ensese nkofo ne ye. Nti na Paul credit kanka bi ho asem chapter 10 no dada. Ukodu chapter 14 the verse 25 no chapter 14 the verse 25 na tie and thus akra would defeat the verse 22 neighbor no mame no nkenkan. Therefore tongues are for a sign, not to those who believe but to unbelievers, but prophesying is not for unbelievers but for those who believe. So there were unbelievers who used to come in their midst wabano so be prophesy na or kankasa hodwa eno no ebe sign the man who say there is the power of God. In the tongue speaking in a sign for ye believers a sign for unbelievers say na Paul echiremu. In the verse 23, therefore if the whole church comes together in one place and all speak with tongues, and there come in those who are uninformed or unbelievers, these are the messengers or the angels, we then not say they are out of their mind. Thank God for they question about them some kwan no moye. We no wait Debbie. But in the verse 24, but if all prophesy and an unbeliever or an uninformed person comes in, he is convinced by all, he is convicted by all. Now the verse 25, and thus the secret of his heart are revealed, and so falling down on his face he will worship God and report that God is truly among you. Inti nankofo ne ba what the report call ahana Bible no twi adwegina so say because of these angels we ought to be careful in verse 10. Ama one for bad report am ko say a Christopher ni mu no temple prostitute ni bi yede ewo mu because of the angels. Now some kobobo we nyina no me say know the background of the book of First Corinthians. The background of the Corinthian city, what was happening. Now in verse 11, nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord. For as women came from man, even so man also comes from woman, but are all things from God. Inti etwe adwe just say no nkyere say ye say o be man ti ne ye bo ba ne kyere say nje say oba hu hia de bi oba ma fi oba mu na oba nso fi be ma mu say Nyankopon yi Adam mfe pade na ode bo Eve so na be wo be ma inti we are all interdependent on ourselves. Now in the verse 13 o kan sa asem we wie no ahana ye ba behwe the study of veil no the second aspect of it. First aspect in here me ankasa me provide bibi ahata me so because of my symbol of authority my worry nti kire say me shebe me bi ase ana say me free abraboboni bi mu I no so kire say me yi me hu afisate bi animu. Okay, now you hear the verse 13. Judge among yourself. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Or say na mo atan nature say so oba bebo mpaye no nkata ni ti so ana nature na wa ne che say 1 Corinthians 4 nim what was happening. Said the temple prostitute na wa ba no fe ana enye fe kra. No, the 12 verse 14. Does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. Or say nempo, ewiase nimdie mu, Nyankopon abosuo mu no. Ben mejina ni trihwi kusuwa. Inti we feel the physical veil no about the next veil. As a veil where the hair covering the head. Ehwi no ahata itire ni so no. We heard the word katalupto no a ye de throw the veil no a ewa ha no a. Aha ne kire bibia hang down covering the face. Na eboama wutumi ye no ne the first veil no ayeye no Moses ye bi. Even in the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 13 to 14 say bra Moses ko je mransem du ne baaye no na nanimu hyerenti no the veil ahata nanim enye ne tiri hwi na ya an additional thing na woye Jewfo ni mu ba Paul si dey bi Corinth for mema de enye mo culture enya de awosam ye even so be makra judge tiri hwi kusu a emwa no nature even does not agree to that. Na eba ne saa e wo se wo ye de woti ase. Though there are some few instances in the Old Testament onkofo bi wa ne efra won Nazarite no wo ja wo hwi a ni ye ntwa ye mfa blade nka ni hwi. And obi any Samson. John the Baptist was a Nazarite. Oka the book of Numbers chapter 6 verse 13. Judges chapter 13 verse 5. These people no now also they existed. But as small for Paul say to the Corinthians, long hair no nenye their culture for the men. But for the women, it was their culture. It was something they ought to do. Zan say no any dia no nyankopon dia ye de amawo. Okay sa asem ni wie no kire say na oba de so oba ja ni trinhwi a nature kire say eye nimonyam say nso nyankopon de ni hwi no ama ne se nkataso. And a current ni ba ko yi ni hwi no there was all this something physical at the hata so but you can we are is it a doctrine, is it a teaching for the churches? And verse 16 say no. Verse 16 say and somewhere yaka waha whether the physical veil or whatsoever and yet teachings and famaye. Now let's read the verse 16. But if anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such customs, nor do the churches of God. So obi person hunu biribia maninkai no hunu se ye ni sanchi nhihye ote Ghana ha, this is not our custom, nor do the churches of God. Inti Kristo asafu ni biara enni nkyerɛkyerɛ bia sa chinchina e wo so koboduku chinchina wo so de bibe chichin ni tire wanya sa wayamfom so da bi nyankopon se bodi wunhwi no ama for a covering ma wunhwi ni hata wutri so siesie wi ni ye ne ntumi mmoa na ma unni ade anini odafoba when the Bible come now so people are binding where God has not bind and they are losing where God has not loosed. Verse 15-16 ma ade ne clear onyankopon de oba ni hwina ma ne senkataso that is nature. Into we oba na wo hwame a wo hwi no na ye wutiri so nkataso we oba na wo hwame a that is what God has given you, that is natural. Nemom sa chinchina nche wo so ogu veil ana oboduku no opa obebo opa omo we nya babo nkyerɛkyerɛ a wase wa moduku a waye boni ana oboduku a waye boni no asori bi so kyerɛkyerɛ saa sense so obabo duku jani hwi ni saa eno no nya nkyerɛkyerɛ nemom dia Bible tu ye hufo no kasa kyerɛ ye ne se yen tisie ye tiri hu ni yie enkoye biribi a de ohaw kase ebeye dey ebebre yen. 1 Timothy chapter 2 therefore na memfa wo emre ewiye the verse 9. In like manner also that the woman adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for woman, professing godliness with good works. And also we oba and kofufa nyem bin so wuhwi ebo ding o Kristo ni ba sorry kwesiada enwi egu ne tri so 1,000 Ghana oba sorry beto collection 5 cedi uyo Kristo ni Bible say dey bi o fa eni ewu ade esiesie wo ho Enye biribi a eye ahwenepa e wo buo mu. All these things are physical. Na wo dey wo physical body ni ho yie na wanwe huhum famu asetena de a ena na wo Kristo som na wo ye no wo ye ne sen odofo pa Bible nkyerɛkyerɛ a wo kan a wo betumi ehunu no wafa adesua bi wo mu no enu nie. Read 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 1 ekosi the verse 16. Don't just pick a verse out of context and find your teaching say chinchin oba moduku a ontumi nkwa aso dem. Enu Pentecost for no one aka yes no. That is not the teachings of the Bible. Therefore we ought to change. We ought to desist from it. Say onyankopon asam no e no kre na ye baako na emfam papa mu nya de emba. Our God is not the author of confusion. Wakoka chiro obi say uboduku, akoka chiro obi say moduku. That is not the God I know. But the God of the Bible, the God of the universe, ordinance samama ye no achire mu say the hair is given to us for a covering. Radin kan ho no shroud say bre nyina wo gibre na wo hey. If you have question, comment, put them at the comment section. Meje bre na me no wa baba besua, and from time to time no we'll get to understand this. Radin kan ho no shroud say wa hwe video yi woni ofoforo enche. If me brother Emmanuel Jesse Kwanza, me number e wo screen so wonti bibia ase a utumi efre me na meje wo so Yesu onyankopon asem. Shalom. Peace. Bye bye.
From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead.